So what I'll do is I'll hand you over to the lovely Jonathan, who will go through the start of the reality check and what the reality check is about and why we set up the reality check events and roundtable event. And then it will Jonathan will pass you over to Robin, and Robin will start off the session.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So the reality check has been a topic that I've talked about for a number of years in different guises, but it boils down to three fundamental things. And Wayne's just joined, and Wayne's probably heard this 100 times from me before, so apologies, Wayne. So the three questions are: what's the view? You know, what are we trying to achieve? What's the reality on the ground, and how do we bridge the gap between the two? So, you know, what is the actual difference? So that's why it's the reality check. And transition partners have been trying to get me to do talks with them for quite a long time. And at this time, it was perfect, actually, that I became available at the start of COVID, like a lot of people did, and it seemed a logical step to start this series. It has become very much focused around how people are feeling with COVID as a context, but it's not necessarily just about COVID and that context, but it seems to have taken that as a natural direction. We bring a different speaker in to join Emma and myself each time. And this time I'm really honoured to have Robin with me, because Robin has been quite instrumental in a lot of the views that I've formed over the years. And actually from a Scrum perspective, he was the person who actually got me started on the Scrum side of Agile. So I'm really pleased to have Robin with us today. So Robin, over to you, mate.
Cool, excellent. Cheers. Thanks, John. So today we're going to talk a bit about retrospectives and sort of remote retrospectives and virtual retrospectives. So again, it could be that it's COVID related, because obviously a lot of us are working from home at the moment, but it could be if you've got teams that are spread across the globe anyway, that how you deal with those. But sort of a preamble is a bit COVID based, mainly because obviously prior to the first lockdown, teams would have been used to individuals working from home sort of every now and again. But when it came to those main team meetings, such as refinement, reviews, retrospectives, planning, teams would get together, they'd co-locate, get in the same room, and that basically increased the effectiveness of those sessions and the value that they generate. But obviously for the last year, a lot of these ceremonies have been held remotely, lots of screen sharing, just to enable the whole team to see what's being discussed. And the difficulty with this, it's often hard to judge the engagement levels of everyone that's attending, even when you've got your cameras turned on. Obviously, some people have got cameras on now, some people have got them off. So you can see a few little faces, but you're a little sort of small head at the top of the screen. And obviously, when you're co-located, the facilitator of that session can sort of scan the room. They can see if there are any side conversations that are going on, if there are any distractions, if people are sort of looking out the window, if there's any lethargy. And you can deal with those sort of much more easily. You can sort of work out whether we need to sort of, let's take a break, take 5 minutes, get a coffee, let's come back to this. But it's much more difficult to do that when you're in a remote setting, when you're on a Zoom call, a Teams call, whatever it may be. Particularly if you've got a lot of people with their microphones that are muted as well, you won't be able to tell if their keyboard's tapping away and they're doing other work. And although it's sort of understood and appreciated that sort of these fully remote teams that we've had for the last year are going to have some challenges for these new working arrangements, we wouldn't have predicted that sort of for many of us, we might not have been into an office for almost a year. So I know the last time I was in the office was sort of March last year. My wife's really ready for me to go back into the office. She says I'm far too loud when I'm on calls. So the organisational perception is that by now we probably should have found alternative methods to achieve the results that we would have seen had we all been co-located in the same room. And this might be true for some of the more regular meetings that we hold. So backlog refinement is likely to be led by the product owner, and we're going to get description details and acceptance criteria being updated on a shared screen. Or planning sessions, they're going to be held in a sort of similar structure and format, with items being selected and confirmed for development. And reviews being sort of demonstrated, led by one person. And that's the real difference between those sessions and retrospectives. Those sessions are led by one individual and everybody else is sort of following and contributing. But retrospectives are a whole team affair. To get the most value, you need the whole team to be engaged and participate. And that's a lot more difficult to do when you're all remote and virtual. it might be that obviously to try and do some of that, you'll have some sort of working agreements or things around etiquette to make sure that actually the session runs smoothly. But for some teams, I know for some of the teams that I still work with, these sessions can be difficult to make sure that everybody's engaged and you get as most value from it. So that's what we want to try and discuss in this roundtable, is looking at some of the tools, the techniques that you might have employed for these remote or virtual retrospectives, and any different formats that you've used because you have to do this in a slightly different way. And obviously we can then look to work out how we can maximize everything. So let's start with tools. So in days gone by, when you're all in the office, it was Post-its and Sharpies. That's what you had. You had these things here, and you just used those an awful lot of the time. Might have had a whiteboard as well. But what tools are people using now for their remote or virtual retrospectives, good or bad, that you've experienced over the course of the last year?
We're using Miro quite a lot, just as a virtual whiteboard. It's good for having Post-its and things, a lot of different ways that you can just approach it. So even using different retrospective games, so if you're like using the sailing ship, you can just draw it and then start sticking your Post-its around. Less effective, but a lot easier to set up. We've just been using our Asana boards, set up a new board and just have one column for each, like things we want to continue doing, things that we want to stop doing, things we need to do more, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've been using Mural, which is similar to Miro, and there are a few built-in templates. You know, the usual stop, start, continue. But I also like to use things like a temperature check. So get the team to perhaps pick a word or a picture that describes how they're feeling at this point in time. A bit of an icebreaker type thing.
Because I'm working in different time zones, we don't always get a chance to actually meet. So we're using a lot of co-authoring at the minute. So we're just in a general kind of Google Doc, and people are we're not just kind of saying what we're thinking and what we're doing and that sort of stuff, but we're just tracking how we're feeling and stuff like that, which it can sound a little bit soft at times, but it's almost like a little bit of a journal or a diary, but everybody's co-authoring it together, so everyone can comment in line and put the feedback on, and it's breaching that distance gap and time zone.
I think for me, they've already been called out, Mural and more recently Miro boards, but the other one I use is Ideas board. I find that quite useful at times. Use it more like a jotter than anything, but it works quite well with distributed teams.
Again, I think obviously one of the main ones I've used is Miro, and I think anything that's got some templates in it is good. Obviously, it's having those virtual whiteboards. You've got Google Jamboards as well is another that I've used, and I know there are some out there that are sort of paid for, or you get 30 days sort of free for different bits. What have been the sort of the main benefits of things like the Miro boards? Would you use those when you got back into an office environment, or is it a case of once this lockdown ends and we're allowed to go back into the office, are you going to continue to use these tools?
But personally, I would, because I'm working with offshore teams. So if I'm back in the office or not, I've still got people that are co-located.
I think I'm a big advocate of the whole working together alone or silent working kind of things. And if you are a more reflective person and you do need a little bit of a moment to think on things, then all these tools are massive enablers, as opposed to the old way of where, loudest voice in the room, or the one with the kind of the most kind of highest paid person and all those sorts of things. This gives everybody a bit of a voice. So I'm a big fan of these techniques alongside some others as well.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that as well. From my perspective, it's the combination of tools. Robin, you mentioned combination of tools earlier on. So, we're using Slack quite a lot alongside, obviously, Teams or, sorry, my machine just playing up on me here. Yeah, so chat software plus Slack plus something like a Miro board. The thing I like about Miro board is you can turn the tracking on not only on the changes, but where people are. So you can actually follow the cursor around. You can see what they're actually concentrating on. So whereas you may not visually see what they're doing, you can actually see where they're actually heading, where the cursor's moving to, and therefore you can get a feel for where they're going. So I think there are some benefits on the distributed teams from that perspective with that tool.
And it's good to hear about these new tools, because in recruitment, obviously, I've got my virtual team as well, and kind of keep on top without micromanaging of where they are. Trello board was amazing for me. We use Slack, but some of these other ones I think I'm going to have a look at after the session and definitely implement. I like the fact that you can track where people are in certain things on the one that you just discussed. So 100% going to be on that. Jonathan, you can help me set them up.
They're pretty intuitive, and that's one of the things I like about it. I've not used the templates that are built with it. I don't know if anyone else has used the templates, but there are a load of templates and flow tools that sit with it. But I just use it as a basic board. One of the things I really like about it is it's infinite in size. You know, the disadvantage of the physical room exercise, Robin, is you run out of space. You have to reorganise and retidy, take photographs of it and type it up. You know, it's all online, and you can just keep zooming out for as far as you need to get it as big as you want. So
that's another point. As you're saying, taking photos of it, where it's already there, it's all typed up. You don't have to have any issues with bad handwriting, and you can just leave it there, so you can come back to it later. So I've been doing, when we've done retrospectives, we've gone back and looked at exactly what we said the week or 2 weeks prior, and we can actually see all of those same points. That have we actually addressed that with the actions that we took last time? And having it all there, rather than in an office where someone comes into the room and takes all the Post-its off, it's been really helpful.
With things like Miro, I know obviously I've got a Miro account and use that as well, that you get access to sort of edit the last 3 boards on the free version. Has anybody found anything sort of that's a disadvantage like that with some of these tools?
Yeah, I think that's a very big point for me, Robin. The big corporate world where you're working for kind of public sector or larger organisations, I found that because they tend to not quite be up to speed with this or not have the budget, there's various reasons. Either way, they've not got these tools, and they want you to use the tools that they have available rather than going on to these other ones. You've got to work within the constraints of what their capabilities and experiences and those sorts of things. So I do find that there's a certain element of use what you've got to come into play here. When you're working with a client in particular, there's a real kind of what works for them. And it's great to be able to be an advocate of these tools and really share them. But you've got your early adopters as always, and you've got your people a bit slower, and we need to just recognize those people and make sure they're comfortable and able to contribute in whatever means works.
I've just posted in the chat a link to a tool called Echometer. One of my colleagues has purchased this recently. I've not yet used it. I've had a quick look at it, but the concept of this is that it sends out a questionnaire, a survey type thing ahead of the retro, where you can collect your data in advance, and then you spend the retro talking about the feedback and the comments that have been collected. It might be worth exploring. I've no idea what it costs or anything, but it's just a different way of doing it. Maybe I could feedback at a future session whether we think it's good or not.
Absolutely. And obviously, one of the things we're trying to do now as well is obviously, capture details of all of these tools. So obviously, as people go through and mention stuff, if you can whack it into the chat as well, we can obviously collate all of these things and send out that list, because I'm sure there are things that individuals might not have been aware of beforehand, but it gives them a chance to go and explore and try them out, even if it is a free version for 30 days, and then you can try and co-opt your organization into paying for the premium one.
And I think that's I was going to say that's the thing as well. It's building sort of the need and want for particular sources for you to use, but then also convincing the pass holders that you can get it as well. I think that's another challenge for businesses, not being able to purchase everything for everyone, and they do have to streamline things. I think some companies that I know and I work with have got so many different tools that everyone uses, but sometimes actually the lesser tools is probably going to get used a lot more. If that makes sense.
I think Zoom's a good example of that. You know, for years I've worked with Zoom-like tools, but they've all been licensed, and suddenly I'm using Zoom for nearly everything because I'm not paying for it. I think just going back to the question again, Robin, from a slightly different angle, what I'm finding where I'm in the equivalent of a retrospective at the moment is because people are remote from each other, you don't necessarily have a feel for what's coming up. When you're in the middle of an environment with people around you, you know what they're feeling, you know how they're thinking, and you almost know therefore how to steer the retrospective, what angle you want to take it. I quite like the idea that Steve just mentioned about, you know, having preemptive information, so going into these retrospectives, not quite the essence of how I'd want to run a retrospective, but in the absence of having that actual being able to read body language and sentiment, possibly a good alternative.
I think that tool, you don't get to see the comments that people have written. You just know they've submitted their input. So I still think you get to see it collectively as a group.
Okay, so I think then that opens up the question is, are there any tools out there that allow you to preempt and pre-collate? Because for me, like I said, what I'm finding is I'm getting curveballs thrown in, and that's fine. I've got no issue with that. But if we're trying to get teams to be high performing, and you can't necessarily keep your finger on the pulse all the time because people are remote, you know, are there tools and techniques that are supporting keeping your finger on the pulse?
I think, if I may chime in my experience, what I try to do is just bring it out there and let the team understand that this is what I'm trying to achieve, and it's a bit difficult because we're remote. So we will try using this. And I think, because I mean, the tools do their best, but if people don't support in using the tool for what you want, then it will fall on its face. So that's what I just tell them, that we're trying to mimic this idea. So let's try this. And what I've come to realize, I mean, one of my teams decided to add a kudos column to the retro board. So throughout the sprint, when someone did something that was kudos worthy, they'll put it there. So it then became the icebreaker of the retrospective. So, you know, because yeah, it's hard enough staring all day at a box, at a screen. So I think just bringing it out there, people want to do good work. So if you just put it out there, they will adjust. I don't think any tool will address every single requirement. I don't think it's possible.
I think that's a good idea, the kudos column. I love that.
Yeah.
We use a tool called 15.5 to get a weekly pulse on everyone. You can ask specific questions, but also people give a score of 1 through 5 of how they are feeling for that week. But what you're saying in terms of just adding a kudos column, I think that's a good way, a really good way, because it brings it to the forefront at the start of the retro. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, thanks.
I suppose that's one of the techniques that could be used then, particularly in terms of preparation for retrospectives, is obviously having the boards or the tool ready early and having that shared so people could get on beforehand to sort of pre-populate some of the information. So it saves a bit of time as well, potentially during the retro itself, rather than everybody sort of sitting there looking at a screen that's being typed on.
Yeah.
Robin, let me throw the question to you. So Robin and I have worked together before, and Robin is very visual in what he does. There's information radiators everywhere. It's very clear where the challenges lie in the teams, not on a personal level, but within what we're trying to achieve, working agreements and so on, and constantly updating that information. And that I've seen people put tools down to go and see what Robin's going to go and change because something's changed. You know, and that creates an interesting dynamic in teams that motivates them. How are you coping, Robin, with the absence of being able to do that in a physical environment?
It's difficult. Obviously, it's using what you've got available. So it'll be using things like Confluence and updating that and keeping that up to date. Whether you can have some dashboards there or dashboards within Jira if you're using Jira or TFS or whatever it may be, to show those things, and then continually pointing people to it. So obviously in Slack, sort of saying, yeah, I've updated this today, and this is what it looks like. This is my interpretation. What do other people think? Trying to get that conversation going, and that's what a lot of this agile ways of working is all about. It's the conversations that we have, because they're going to lead to the ideas that make us improve. And so again, it's not the metric that says we're getting through this many stories or this many story points. It's what are we doing to enable us to do more, and how can we get better? And it's just that starter for 10.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I guess the question I'm asking is more about that motivational bit. And you know, when we had that big long table, Robin, the number of people that used to come to look at the information that was there, they didn't necessarily understand what the information was, but it interested them, so they came to it. That was a motivator in its own right. Have you found a substitute for that?
Not a direct one-for-one, no. It's in a way, you've got to try and talk to as many people as you can. So sort of talking to the team, talking to the teams that they closely work with, talking with senior managers, and sort of trying to get them on board with the things that you want to try and change and the dysfunctions that you might see, and take people on that journey, which is so difficult to do when you can't just sort of turn around and point at a board and say, look, this is what it is, this is what the problem is, that you need to continually feed that information through another medium. It's a lot more difficult to do, because it's quite easy for, once you stop sharing the screen and they go back to what they're doing, they can't see it out of the corner of their eye anymore. Sort of, if it's up on the wall and they're in the same office, they can continually see it, but once they close down that Confluence web page, it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's trying to keep up that engagement as much as possible, which unless you can control their desktops and sort of continually get those to change with the latest information, which I'm sure is possible. I know that there's regularly updates on my work laptop that change the desktop background to something else. So I need to find that person that can update that with my metric graphs.
I think the closest I've come, and I haven't done it personally, but the closest I've seen goes back to what we said earlier about the Miro board. You know, because it's an unlimited size thing, that I've seen that used as a visual radiation. You just, as you said, keep pointing people back to it. But you can also turn on change notifications, so that when something's changed, you can see where the changes occurred. But again, that assumes that somebody's actually going to go and look at it.
That could become the same as a Jira notification. How many people look at those? Who's got a spam folder for Jira notifications? So I'd ask everybody to put their hand up, but it would be everybody.
Absolutely.
Just one little thing that I do in retrospectives is, you know, you can use all sorts of fancy tools, can't you? You can fun retrospectives, tasty cupcakes, Esther Derby, mural, whatever, right? But for me, the litmus test is, are the teams actually making improvements? So one of the things I do, if it's a Scrum team, for example, even with a Kanban team, if they have a retrospective, what I do is, let's say they're using sprints for sake of argument, and normally you'd have 3 hours for a retro, right, for a month, and so 1.5 hours for a 2-week sprint. A lot of the people of the team know what the issues are. Like within 20 minutes, we know what the issues are. Boom, boom, boom. These are some of the things within our control. These are some of the things that are beyond our control, beyond our influence. We need someone else to help. So John, can you take that away, kind of thing? And what I do with the team, I say, look, yeah, there's probably 10 things we can improve here, but let's make peace that you're going to fix 1 or 2 things and you're going to do it right now. And they say, what? I want you to fix something right now. What do you mean fix something right now? Fix something right now. It's something you've got control to. Let's not say we should do this and we should do that. And I tell people, you know, I should lose weight and just look at me, right? It's not happening, right? So, and the teams who do that, who actually make improvements in the retrospectives themselves, I've seen a high correlation between those teams and really high performance in terms of really engaged customers, because they are actually improving. And they can have that log afterwards as well about what did we actually improve? Oh yeah, we did this, we did that. Oh, actually we did do that. Instead of fooling ourselves, we're going to do all sorts of things and conquer the world. We're just being realistic about what we can do. And I'm not talking about band-aids here. I'm talking about like really fixing things, you know. It might be just understanding a problem better. It could be better team agreement, better definition of done, better Kanban board, more understanding of the metrics. Maybe agree some golden rules as a team, new behaviors, I don't know. But I noticed that teams who do that do really, really well. And that's the key, like, because if we build up a reputation as having all sorts of fancy techniques for doing retrospectives, but if someone kind of sits back and says, hang on a second, what's actually changed? We're talking about the same stuff for the last 6 months. You know what I mean? Just so I'd throw that in. I'm curious what you tried yourselves as well.
I'm coming away from the boards now, but one thing I've started to do is avoid back-to-back meetings. I always like at least 15 minutes between meetings, and often I'll open them early because it gives a chance for people to join the meeting and have that informal conversation before they start. And that helps build the team and break the ice as well. And I found those 5-10 minute chats really, really interesting and informative. And it makes the meeting more beneficial when you start because they're already bedded in.
I think you've touched on a good point there. So when I was, again, going back to when I was working with Robin, we used to have the team daily stand-up, and I literally used to run from one part of the building to another for the next, which was a scrum of scrums. And that was always frustrating because we always knew we were going to be 5 minutes late for it. I got into the technique of running meetings for 50 minutes instead of an hour. But that, in the current climate, has taken on an even more importance because it's the comfort break, because you're zooming out, you know, you constantly, one Zoom call ends, the next one starts, and the tendency is not to move away from your computer. You're not getting the breaks away from it. But what I've also found is, rather than making it 10 minutes, I'm making it more like 15, because quite often you'll end up with some informal chats, the sort of stuff you would have done around a vending machine before. So before we started this meeting, the three of us were actually having a quick chat, and we weren't talking about this meeting, we were just chatting in general. That makes a team. You know, if everything you're talking about is work, it suddenly becomes a lot harder. So I've started to move to a 45-minute model with a 5-minute, you know, turn up in that 5 minutes, you've got a chance. If you haven't, we'll see you at the start of the meeting. The other one, and it came out one of the reality check sessions, is I've started doing the virtual commute. So somebody spoke about the half an hour that it takes to go to and from home, that used to get to and from the office to home. Using that time to go and do something like go for a walk means that you have a proper segregation between your day job and being at home, because one's flowing into the other. And I found that I was really guilty of that. It was just not ending. So that virtual commute for my mental health been really, really useful as a technique and tool. And I've started encouraging teams to start doing that as well.
That's a great suggestion.
And on that side as well, I've got some of my team that sort of live close to me. So now sort of things improving and we are able to go out and potentially meet outside. Is it worth, for those meetings, if you can get 3-4 of you to meet up and actually go for a walk and discuss things rather than do it on Zoom, just to get you out? I don't know if it would work within an Agile environment, but it would definitely work, I think, for my team for a bit of normality.
So I'd absolutely encourage it. It goes back to what John said, you know, it's about that interaction between people. You know, it's very easy, especially with the retrospective, to have a retrospective come up with a load of great ideas and then you park it up. And unless you're Robin, who is quite good at chasing up on these things, then you go, oh yeah, we did discuss that a couple of months ago, didn't we? And it's not moved. But these personal interactions are the things that actually get things done. So, you know, if I had the opportunity, if I had teams near me, I would be going out for coffee cup walks.
That's my next week sorted then. Get out of the house a bit more.
It's a long walk to Southampton for me.
So I know obviously we've talked a little bit about some of the techniques around the hosting of sessions. How do people make sure that everyone remains engaged when we're running these retrospectives?
Topic close to my heart here. I've been speaking about this recently, and there's a few things about that, about checking in with people constantly. And when you're doing the retrospective, this is where, for me, having a bit of a co-host or someone helping you out really comes into its own. If you can, even at the start of the meeting, just go over to somebody, whether you know them or not, could you just help me just keep a kind of sense check on the room, or just help with the scribing and things, and just taking a weight off your shoulders as host, because then what it enables you to do is when you're facilitating or trying to get the ideas, somebody else is also in the background conversing with people, just checking they're okay, especially in something like a chat function, where you can just say to somebody, oh, how are you getting on with everything so far? And you can engage people on that forum. So you've actually got two communication methods in one here. We've got the talking and the chat. So now if you've got a second person to help you out, you can enable both, and you've got double the engagement opportunity.
I think that's a really good suggestion.
Excellent.
Often I will actually address people by name in a call and get them to contribute. So I won't wait for their suggestion. I'll actually say, can you comment on this? Or can you present your ideas on this? It gives a bit of variety in the call as well, rather than one person speaking all the time.
Yeah, I've tried that as well. I've noticed that a few people, they're just inherently very quiet, and they don't want to engage too much. They'll write things down, but they don't want to speak. So kind of on the other side of that, the people who I know are the loudest speakers, I've just taken them aside before the meeting and said, look, obviously I appreciate everything that you can input to the meeting, but maybe when we start asking for anyone else's input, wait a little bit longer, count to 10 before you give your input. And they've all been fine with it, because it then means that the quieter people, it's like they go, oh, it is quiet, maybe I should say something, and they have stepped up, which has been great.
I don't think there's a very formal way of doing it. It's very much around how well you know your team and how well you communicate with them. And there's nothing prescriptive. It's very much about how you actually manage the team, lead the team.
So when we run these sessions, Emma and I usually have in the background a chat running between the two of us, and we're scanning the room, we're looking for patterns, we're looking for flat spots in it, quiet moments, topics that people are picking up. And I've started using that more in day-to-day approaches, so I will have a second set of eyes on what I'm doing. It means I can get a break as well, especially on longer sessions, but it means that I can concentrate on what I need to focus on, but somebody else can be looking for those patterns there. I think they're really useful techniques, and some of the stuff that's sat in liberating structures as well for getting people to speak. So you might have a quiet person in the room and a loud person. One of the greatest things I got taught by someone was make that loud person the scribe, because that slows them down a little bit, gives other people the opportunity.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really good idea. I want to try that.
Of course, another one that sits with that is the person who's loudest asks the quiet person what their view is of what the loud person's just said. You know, there's a number of techniques there, but again, it boils down to knowing the team, knowing the strengths and weaknesses. You don't want to isolate somebody or make them feel on the spot if they're naturally quiet in nature. It's about trying to bring out the best of the people that you can.
So I suppose another one as well, it again depends on the size of the teams that are having the retrospectives, is whether you can actually have more breakout rooms so people do things in 2s or 3s and then present back their discussion to the team, because that will then get everybody talking and interacting and work out whether the teams then see the same issues or not.
I think that's a great idea. We use that. We've been doing some training, and the breakout area is the first time that I've used it. And you interact with people that you probably wouldn't do normally in that bigger setting. And it's really nice to see people step up, like Jonathan just said, the quieter people to step up and bring forward their ideas that actually really good ideas that we are going to implement. So breakout areas is a really good idea and something I'm going to continue with.
Just on that, following up, there's a tool called Wonder.me. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a German, Wonder.me, as in me. And it's like this room. It's free, by the way. And you can go in and you can put an image in of some rooms or whatever. So I use it with my family sometimes in Ireland. And so we have the one room for the kitchen, the TV room, the front room, whatever. And people go to an area of the house, and you can, if I want to join Jonathan's bubble, it'll open up a call with Jonathan. Then if someone else wants to drop in, it'll drop. So you have little bubbles around the house, so to speak. And in the client I currently have at the moment, they're starting to use it for like informal discussions. Like if you've got 20 people and you just kind of want to go over and talk to someone, you literally just drag your circle over to that person or to their group or whatever they're in, and it kind of creates a nice informal setup. The only thing is being free. I'm not sure how secure it is and all that, but if you just keep it to informal, like non-confidential discussions, it's worth a try. The only thing is it doesn't work on mobile phone very well. You need a computer, really. It's a startup, so early days.
Sounds like a really interesting one. I want to have a look at that one.
Yeah, it's nice.
Robin, a question to you and for the wider audience is, given we've been in effectively one form or other restrictions or lockdown for coming upon a year now, quite a few people are working with teams that they've never actually met. So how are people finding retrospectives with, for want of a better expression, strangers? How are they getting around that? How are they building the team spirit?
So I fully joined a company during lockdown. So I've not met many people at all from my teams. So I've just been adding a little social things in. So similar to what John was saying in terms of having like a breakout with different rooms of things, we use Discord, which is it's a voice and text chat thing that's used usually for gamers for the most part. But we have a room specifically set aside for lunch table. So then say at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll set a reminder for myself. I'll just message in the channels like, you know, want a chat, a coffee, and we'll go and have a coffee break while just going over into this other room. Some of the early on, it was difficult to initiate some conversations because I said you don't know people at all. So then I sent a company-wide Google Forms out. It's a case of just what questions do you ask people when you first meet them? And then I've used that to get random questions just to ask. So you use a little random wheel generator thing to pull up a question. And it's a case of, oh, right, Duncan, your turn. Pick up this question. What would you say to this? And that's just really helped because it's given different questions that people may not have already thought of. And you end up having a nice discussion around those things. So really, it's outside of the retrospective. It is just having these social touch points.
Really,
yeah,
sorry, go on.
So similar to that, I'm working with a client where there's quite a lot of expansion and growth at the moment. So there are new people popping in most days. And I think that combined with the offshore model means that, similar to Greg, I've been doing quite a lot of kind of virtual coffee sessions where every fortnight we'll have a half-hour chat. And we mix the audience, small groups of no more than 3 or 4. And we just make sure that the one topic that we're not allowed to talk about is work, and we almost always drift onto food and things like that, but it just breaks the ice and it makes people feel a bit more comfortable with each other. And I think it's ever so important now that we can't physically see people just to do things like that.
I think it's a good one. That I was at the virtual pub last week. It wasn't work related, but it was done online till LINE. It's just again, it's a voice and chat piece of software, but it was actually a really, really good time. It wasn't the same as being in the pub, but it was pretty close. A couple of people getting quite leery towards the end of it, but yeah, I think that that interaction within work, but not on a work topic, I think is probably just as important from a retrospective perspective as the actual retrospective itself.
there's also nothing wrong with actually giving somebody a call on their phone and just speaking to them sometimes. I think we get so focused on video calls, we forget we can just pick a phone up and speak to people.
Yeah, I think you're right there, John, although I've been promising to phone you for a long time. Sorry about that, mate.
That wasn't a pointed reference, but it's so easy to do in between calls, is to give somebody a call, and it's actually really good. Then when you meet on the call, things are quite different.
It's a good point.
It is, because it's one of those things that we would have done previously. When we were all in the office and needed to speak to someone and they weren't there, you'd pick the phone up and call them, and have that chat and talk about things that actually now, as you think, I need to contact John, right, let's send a message on Slack, and then you sit there watching the screen waiting for a response, where actually you could probably get it done in half the time just by picking up the phone.
I think you touched on a really good point there, Robin. I've got quite a few people just recently that have been messaging me, and when I haven't replied within sort of 20 minutes, they're phoning me to, why haven't you answered me? And it's because the tool's instant, they're expecting instant response. They're not necessarily thinking that actually people are busy on the other end. And if you'd really, really need me that urgently, pick up the phone in the first place. I'm probably just as guilty as anyone of that.
I think for me, I prefer picking up the phone and speaking to people, because I get things done a lot quicker rather than sitting there waiting for an answer. It's a bit more instant, isn't it? So
I think we live in an age where information is instantly available. We almost expect it to get an instant reply. You know, you find the message off through Slack or through whatever. You expect somebody to be sat there ready to give you a response, and it's become, to me, a bit like email. You know, I don't pick emails up unless it's been sat there for at least 2 days, and if it's still relevant after 2 days, I'll read it, and if not, then they shouldn't have sent me it in the first place.
So I know not to email you now then, Jonathan. Just pick up the phone instead or text you.
I don't read your messages anyway.
Is Emma's sort of email folder next to the Jira notifications folder, John?
It's in the junk folder, actually. But
yeah, straight into, yeah, I'm actually banned from emailing them now.
Actually, no, just on those topics as a collective, you know, because we're using instant tools that send instant messages, and there's almost an anticipation of an instant response. That's obviously putting pressure on people. There is another session that transition partners run called Taking Time in Tech. If you haven't subscribed to it, I strongly recommend you either listen to the last one that was held or attend the next one that's coming up. Because we do need to think about our teams as individuals as well as a team. You know, we do put pressures on ourselves, and for me personally, because I'm sat here and I won't move from this spot, I probably won't move from this spot till this evening, I'm putting undue pressure on myself that's not necessarily needed. And I know there are certain members of transition partners who found it really difficult to pull themselves away from their organisation. But having now done that, I know they're finding it richly rewarding. You know, taking that time as an individual as well as a team is really important.
And I think it's important for the newer starters. I know a lot of you have said that you started with new companies or you're having onboarding new people, and it's, you know, very different to going for your first day into the office when you're just sat at that computer. So taking any time with someone individually or allowing them just to have that space when they're first started and just continuously checking in on them, I think is 100% what I've had to do with some of our new starters. And I think it's really helped them grow and flourish when you're not in that environment. So definitely 100%, you need your own time, but also you need support from everyone around you.
One of the models I've seen that I really like has come from my clients in Poland. And so basically they run the daily stand-up and then they go for coffee for half an hour. Now that was in the physical office, but they've now taken it into the virtual world as well. So as long as you're not on critical path, you've had the stand-up, you know where you're at, and then you go and have the coffee. And you tend to find the conversations continue to flow. So it's more than just a socializing event. It is actually building those relationships and solutionizing to some extent, and I quite like that model.
Does anyone else do anything similar in their teams at the moment?
think that's a no.
I was going to say it went a bit quiet.
Very quiet, didn't it? You killed the room again.
Sorry, I'll just leave now.
No, don't leave me. No,
It's not really relevant to stand-ups, but one thing we are doing with a virtual conference we're organising is the food boxes being delivered to people who are taking part. So they'll get food and a drink delivered to them for the day of the conference. So
I like
they can effectively join in that discussion before the meeting. I think they appreciate somebody else paying for the food.
The thing, yeah, I've had a few things like that, and it's not so much about the chat and the conversation. It's about showing that you're thinking of somebody. And I've had a few kind of various gifts just randomly appearing on the doorstep, like pasta boxes or just a card and things like that from place I work. And yeah, even if it's just some kind of work material, it just shows somebody has thought about you and kind of shared something. And it's not so much about having a conversation or a message or anything like that. So I think that's a really important one, to take a few minutes and find a way to just share that you're thinking about someone, something that's more than contacting them and having a conversation, something that really shows a little bit of insight and thought there. And I think that's something that I think I'll continue to do, and it's a great thing that people are doing.
In the chat box, Sophie's just posted that her partner works from home and there's a 30-minute meeting a week where they just chat, and it's not allowed to be about work, it's a general chat. They seem to really enjoy that. And it's something that when I worked with Robin was really, really good at doing this, being inclusive, making sure everybody was talking with each other. You know, he would quite often talk about his family and so on. But we would talk about, we had a team that had an onshore presence as well as the offshore presence. Really good at mixing stuff up. He used to run things like we did escape rooms at Leeds and so on. I miss those sort of events, you know. I'm just wondering if there's anything similar tool-wise that's available out there to the escape rooms that can be done collaboratively as teams.
There is a virtual escape room you can go on.
Is there?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the murder mysteries to start.
Yeah, I did one before Christmas. Was really good.
And there are games like werewolves and things like that you can do as sort of team exercises. So there are definitely things out there. So I suppose that leads quite nicely onto the sort of the last element of this we want to talk about, is obviously any new formats of retrospective that people have sort of found by being online and virtual, rather than obviously some of those standard ones. It might be that you've found new ways of doing the standard ones as well. But is there anything new that you've identified by having to use some of these online tools?
One of the things that I've started doing is showing flow analytics at the start of the retro to inform the thinking during the rest of the retro. And now, you know, the fact that a lot of Kanban boards, Scrum boards would have moved online. If they're not using Miro or Miro, they're using some kind of tool like Kanbanize or whatever. And if there's good analytics there, you can kind of have really informed discussions. So that's been helpful. That wouldn't have happened so often, actually, when we were face to face.
Shared something at the start, and it's a lady called Christina Lovelock, who actually, I think she's at Leeds Uni, but she speaks at a lot of things, and she shared a retrospect yourself thing, and it was interesting because it was very meditative. When the session ran, it was you know, she kind of give you a bit of instruction, like say at your class or that sort of thing, where it's, I'm just going to guide you to do something, and then I'm going to let you do it, and it was that kind of way of working. So the retro became very quiet retro, really thoughtful. And when you've got all this kind of constant communication, all the constant calls and everything, the silence is really, really powerful. So that kind of, I think it's like a mood board, and that kind of meditative approach where somebody's just really softly guiding you, really calmly going through everything, and then letting you just sit quietly. It's a really good way of doing it.
And what I'll do is I'll send that out to everyone as well. So I've got everyone's email. So make sure that everyone gets a copy of that if you can't download it from the chat.
Thank you.
One of the ones that you've sort of seen, this guy called Chris Stone. You'll be able to find him on LinkedIn, and his website is the virtual agile coach.co.uk, and I'll whack it in the chats. We've got that as well. That he has created a number of Miro templates, but they're fun retrospectives. You need to have the right team to run these with, but they'll be based upon a band or a film and take song titles or quotes and puts them into an agile context to then get people thinking about those sorts of things. So again, it's sort of having a bit of a themed retrospective. So there's things like, it's got like Beatles and Star Trek and Harry Potter and Friends, and so it's taking all those different elements just to try and again put some fun back into the fact that it's another meeting online.
That would be interesting to see, because I've seen you do that in person.
Has Rob been frozen?
I think so.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't know if it was me or Robin that's frozen. I like the idea of the themed retrospectives. I think that's great, because it, like Robin said, it brings people sort of into a different frame of mind than using those and thinking about fun things rather than just the normal day-to-day meetings that you have. So yeah, I like that idea. I might have to tailor it to us in my Monday morning meetings. So I don't know, is there anything anyone else wants to talk about? I think we've got about 7 minutes left. If anyone else wants to have a discussion through anything else that anyone's struggling with, or you know, just wants to pass some ideas through with everyone at all.
Someone mentioned earlier about doing the temperature check. I've been trying to Google it to try and find a walkthrough of that. Could anyone share a link for that at all?
Not got one to hand, but the one that we used to do was, it was only a spreadsheet version, and we used to just kind of ask 3 or 4 questions like, you know, how motivated are you feeling at the minute? What's the team dynamic like for you, and that sort of thing? Are you feeling, you know, kind of like you belong to the team? Just it was questions that were like that were true to our values. So we just looked to look at our values and then said ask questions around that, and then every month you start kind of doing a 1 to 10 score, so you can start seeing it going. If you start seeing the trend down, then you know you've got things to look at and all that. And we just kind of did some outliers. So if anybody said a number that didn't fit with the core, then you start kind of saying, shall we have a bit of a chat? So I'm sorry, I've not actually got the stuff though to share.
No, it's fine. Thank you for giving me a quick overview of that.
I'll do a little search, Greg, as well, and see if I can find anything for you.
I think I may have found something. I'll share it.
Guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but my machine's completely frozen and locked up.
No, we're not hearing you at all.
I think we've been having it. I had problems with my internet earlier, so I don't know if there's something going on at the moment. Too many people online at lunch, I think.
Blaming you again, Emma. I've literally got a frozen screen. I can't see anything.
That's okay. We can see you. It's fine. we can see your frozen face.
Have we lost Robin?
You're on mute, Emma, if you were talking there.
I'm not doing very well here, am I? So yeah, Robin, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to go through at all before I just finish off.
No, I think we've covered everything. So hopefully we've sort of gone through and identified some new tools that people might be able to use, or techniques, and obviously through the information we shared, there's some new formats that people can try. I think obviously looking at the notes I've been making, I think obviously there are some difficulties to some of these things. There might be some costs involved that organizations might not want to bear going forward, but hopefully there are a lot of free things out there that people can use, and this is going to be a benefit to everybody.
Definitely, and I'll copy all the links and send them out to everyone that's on here as well. But then also, as before, I'll do a feedback form. So if there's any topics anyone else wants to speak about next time, or if anyone would like to host with me and Jonathan, then do let us know, and we'll get the next one booked in for a few months' time, and hopefully we'll have some normality back as well. So, but thank you everyone for attending and taking time out today as well.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Emma.
you.
Thanks for organising.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
No
Thanks,
worries. Have a
everyone.
good day.
Cheers,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Hey.